Today, we are going to look at the most horrifying crocodile attacks ever recorded, from a poacher in Australia's wilderness to a social media influencer ignoring warning signs. It was March 15, 2015, when tragedy struck at Crocosaurus Cove, one of Darwin's premier wildlife attractions. The facility, home to over 30 massive saltwater crocodiles, sits in the heart of Australia's Northern Territory, where these apex predators have ruled the waterways for millions of years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the main display lagoon, a concrete habitat designed to house the park's most impressive specimens. The humid tropical air carried the distinctive scent of the wetlands, while tourists began gathering for the day's first feeding demonstration. Noah Whitfield, a 40-year-old maintenance supervisor, had worked at Crocosaurus Cove for 5 years. Known for his efficiency and shortcuts, the divorced father of 2 was eager to finish his weekly cleaning duties early to attend his son's afternoon baseball game. His colleague Miguel Santos had offered assistance that morning, but Noah dismissed the help, confident he could handle the routine walkway maintenance alone. Park Safety Inspector Janet Morrison had repeatedly flagged the deteriorating wooden railings for replacement, creating ongoing tension with Noah, who viewed her concerns as excessive caution. The elevated walkway system, positioned 12 feet above the crocodile habitat, required regular pressure washing to remove algae and debris that accumulated from the tropical climate. Noah's supervisor had recently praised his work ethic, unaware that his employees' rush to complete tasks was compromising safety protocols. Saltwater crocodiles are the world's largest living reptiles, with adult males typically reaching lengths of 14 to 17 feet and weighing between 880 to 1,100 pounds, though exceptional specimens can approach 18 feet. These prehistoric predators possess the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth, capable of exerting pressure exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks, remaining motionless for hours before striking with lightning speed. In captive environments, feeding schedules create heightened states of anticipation and aggression among the population. The crocodiles at Crocosaurus Cove had been conditioned to associate human activity with feeding time, making them particularly responsive to disturbances. As Noah positioned his pressure washer near the compromised railing, the high-pressure water stream created vibrations that stressed the already weakened support posts. The wooden barrier suddenly splintered with a sharp crack, sending Noah tumbling backward through the air. He plummeted 12 feet into the murky water below, crashing directly into the center of the display pond with a tremendous splash. The impact momentarily stunned him, but he quickly surfaced, gasping and disoriented among 32 saltwater crocodiles that had been anticipating their morning feeding. The sound of his fall had alerted every predator in the enclosure, their primitive brains instantly recognizing the disturbance as a potential feeding opportunity. The crocodiles interpreted Noah's thrashing movements as prey behavior. Titan, the dominant 16-foot male, struck first with devastating force. His massive jaws clamped down on Noah's left leg, the bone-crushing bite shattering his femur and severing major arteries. The death roll began immediately, spinning Noah's body violently underwater as blood clouded the murky water. A second crocodile seized his right arm, its powerful jaws crushing bones and tearing through muscle tissue. A third predator grabbed his torso, puncturing his ribcage and collapsing his lung. The coordinated assault created a feeding frenzy as more crocodiles joined the attack, their prehistoric instincts driving them to compete for the unexpected meal. The feeding response escalated as more crocodiles converged on the scene. Noah's screams were cut short as he was repeatedly dragged beneath the surface, the coordinated assault dismembering his body through multiple death rolls. His spine snapped under the tremendous rotational forces, while massive blood loss from severed limbs caused rapid cardiovascular collapse. The churning water turned crimson as the prehistoric predators continued their relentless attack. Within 3 minutes, Noah had succumbed to massive trauma, blood loss, and drowning. Park security arrived to find only fragments of clothing and blood visible on the water's surface. The facility's security cameras had captured the entire incident in horrifying detail, documenting Noah's final moments as he was overwhelmed by the very predators he had worked around for years. An immediate investigation was launched by Northern Territory workplace safety authorities, focusing on the facility's maintenance protocols and safety equipment failures. The park was temporarily closed to visitors while investigators examined the scene. Noah's family expressed devastation at the loss, describing him as a dedicated father who had simply been trying to provide for his children. The incident prompted renewed scrutiny of wildlife facility safety standards across Australia, with calls for mandatory safety harnesses and improved barrier maintenance protocols. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers faced by those working in close proximity to apex predators. It was August 7, 2016, when the remote wetlands of Kakadu National Park became the scene of a deadly encounter. Located in Australia's Northern Territory, this UNESCO World Heritage Site spans nearly 20,000 square kilometers of pristine wilderness, where ancient Aboriginal rock art overlooks waterways that have remained unchanged for millennia. The Adelaide River winds through this untouched landscape, its muddy banks concealing some of the world's largest saltwater crocodiles. During the dry season, these waterways become concentrated hunting grounds where protective females fiercely guard their nesting sites. Spencer Vaughn, a 34-year-old former zoo employee, had fallen from grace after losing his legitimate wildlife career due to misconduct allegations. Desperate for money and familiar with reptile behavior, he had turned to the lucrative black market trade in exotic animal products. Crocodile eggs commanded premium prices from private collectors and illegal breeding operations, making them an irresistible target for someone with Spencer's knowledge and financial desperation. His reluctant business partner, Tommy Nakamura, had warned against the Kakadu expedition, knowing the area's reputation for massive protective female crocodiles. Elder Mary Tungara, a local Aboriginal ranger, had recently noticed suspicious vehicle tracks near sacred nesting sites. Spencer's GPS coordinates led him to a known nesting area where female crocodiles had constructed their mud mounds weeks earlier. Saltwater crocodiles are apex predators that have survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Adult females protecting their nests can exceed 16 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, possessing the most powerful bite force in the animal kingdom at over 3,700 pounds per square inch. These ambush hunters are perfectly adapted for stealth, capable of remaining motionless for hours while monitoring their territory. During nesting season, female crocodiles become extremely aggressive, patrolling their nesting areas and attacking any perceived threats to their eggs. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive bursts of speed from concealed positions, using their massive tails for propulsion through water. Once they secure prey, the signature death roll disorients victims while drowning them in the murky depths. Spencer waded into the shallow water under the cover of darkness, his headlamp cutting through the humid night air as he approached the muddy nesting bank. The water reached his waist as he moved slowly through the Adelaide River, a waterproof bag slung across his shoulder for the valuable cargo. Unknown to the poacher, he had entered the territory of Magna, a 16-foot female saltwater crocodile that had been guarding her nest for weeks. The protective mother detected Spencer's presence immediately through water vibrations and foreign scent, submerging silently and approaching from downstream with practiced stealth. Spencer knelt in the shallow water, his hands working quickly to excavate buried eggs from the first nest he located. His headlamp illuminated the white, leathery shells, as he carefully placed them in his waterproof bag, focused entirely on the valuable prize. Magna positioned herself just 10 feet away, her eyes and nostrils barely breaking the surface as she assessed the intruder. As Spencer reached for another clutch of eggs, the maternal guardian exploded from the water with tremendous force. Magna's massive jaws clamped down on Spencer's torso with bone-crushing power, the initial bite penetrating his ribcage and puncturing vital organs. The impact drove Spencer backward as his headlamp flew into the darkness, plunging the scene into complete blackness. The death roll began instantly, Magna spinning Spencer's body violently as she dragged him into deeper water. The rotational force snapped Spencer's spine in multiple places while the crocodile's grip crushed his sternum and collapsed both lungs. Blood filled Spencer's airways as broken ribs punctured his heart and liver. The powerful tail thrashed as Magna continued the death roll, breaking Spencer's pelvis and femur bones. Within 30 seconds, Spencer had succumbed to massive internal bleeding, drowning, and catastrophic spinal injuries. Magna then performed her instinctive behavior, wedging the body beneath a submerged log where it would decompose before consumption. Tommy Nakamura reported Spencer missing after he failed to return to their campsite by dawn. A search operation was launched by Northern Territory Police, but the remote location and crocodile-infested waters made recovery efforts extremely dangerous. Elder Mary Tungara's investigation revealed tire tracks and equipment fragments near the nesting site, confirming illegal poaching activity. The incident highlighted the ongoing problem of wildlife trafficking in protected areas, with authorities vowing increased patrols during nesting season. Spencer's estranged family expressed shock at his illegal activities, stating they had lost contact with him months earlier. Conservation groups used the tragedy to raise awareness about the devastating impact of wildlife trafficking on endangered species populations. The case remained officially unsolved, with Spencer's body never recovered from the ancient waterways he had tried to exploit. It was November 22, 2014, when the Tarcoles River in Costa Rica became the site of a tragic scientific expedition. Located on the Pacific coast near the Carrara National Park, this river system is renowned for having one of the highest concentrations of American crocodiles in Central America. The dry season had dramatically reduced water levels, transforming the normally expansive waterway into a series of concentrated pools that created ideal hunting territories for the region's apex predators. The surrounding tropical dry forest echoed with the calls of scarlet macaws and howler monkeys, while the muddy riverbanks revealed countless crocodile tracks from the previous night's hunting activities. Miranda Keegan, a 29-year-old marine biologist from the University of Costa Rica, had dedicated her doctoral research to understanding American crocodile behavior patterns during drought conditions. Known for her fearless approach to fieldwork, she had been documenting territorial responses and feeding behaviors for 6 months. Her mentor, Dr. Carlos Mendoza, had repeatedly warned her about working alone near the water during peak territorial periods, but Miranda's passion for her research often overrode safety protocols. Paulo Silva, her experienced local guide, understood the dangers of the Tarcoles River, but had grown accustomed to Miranda's determined independence. The research station had received funding to study how climate change and seasonal droughts affected crocodile populations, making this dry season particularly valuable for data collection. American crocodiles are formidable predators, with typical large males reaching lengths of 11 to 15 feet and weighing over 1,000 pounds. Unlike their more aggressive alligator cousins, these crocodiles are typically more reclusive, but territorial males become extremely dangerous when defending prime hunting grounds. Their powerful jaws can exert bite forces exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch, while their muscular tails serve as both propulsion systems and devastating weapons. During drought conditions, concentrated prey populations create highly valuable territories that males will defend aggressively against any perceived threats. The death roll, their signature killing technique, involves spinning their prey underwater to disorient and drown victims, while breaking bones through tremendous rotational force. Miranda approached the research site at dawn, her sampling equipment organized methodically as she prepared for another day of behavioral observations. The river section had shrunk to roughly half its normal width, creating concentrated fish and bird populations that attracted the area's dominant predator. El Jefe, a massive 14-foot American crocodile, had claimed this territory and patrolled it aggressively for weeks. Paulo was 50 meters away, setting up camera equipment, when Miranda began her approach to the water's edge, extending her sampling pole toward the remaining deep water. As Miranda leaned forward to collect her water sample, the saturated mud beneath her knees suddenly gave way. She slid down the steep bank, her equipment scattering as she splashed into the shallow water just 15 feet from the concealed predator. El Jefe had been monitoring the area from a submerged position, his body perfectly camouflaged among floating debris and vegetation. The sudden intrusion triggered an immediate territorial response from the massive crocodile. El Jefe lunged forward with explosive speed, his powerful jaws clamping down on Miranda's left thigh with bone-crushing force. The initial bite severed her femoral artery and shattered her femur bone, sending blood streaming into the muddy water. Her scream alerted Paulo, who immediately began running toward the riverbank. The crocodile's death roll began instantly, spinning Miranda's body violently as she fought desperately to reach the shore. The rotational force broke her pelvis and dislocated her hip joint, while the crocodile's grip tore through muscle and tissue. The churning water turned crimson as El Jefe maintained his hold, performing another death roll that snapped Miranda's lower spine and caused massive internal bleeding. Her struggles weakened rapidly as blood loss and shock took their toll. The attack lasted only 40 seconds, but the crocodile's powerful bite and death roll had inflicted fatal injuries. Paulo reached the shore and threw rocks at El Jefe, but the territorial predator maintained his grip until Miranda stopped moving, her body held firmly in his jaws as she drowned in the bloodied water. Costa Rican authorities launched an immediate investigation into the research station's safety protocols, questioning why Miranda had been allowed to work so close to known crocodile habitat without proper safety equipment. The University of Costa Rica suspended all fieldwork pending a comprehensive review of research procedures. Environmental groups used the tragedy to highlight the increasing dangers faced by scientists studying wildlife in their natural habitats as climate change intensifies territorial behaviors. Miranda's family described her as a passionate conservationist who had dedicated her life to protecting the species that ultimately claimed her. The incident prompted new safety requirements for researchers working near crocodile habitats throughout Central America. It was September 14th, 2013, when the aftermath of Hurricane Idalia transformed the Florida Everglades into a deadly maze of displaced wildlife. 3 days after the Category 3 storm devastated South Florida, the vast wetlands remained submerged under unprecedented floodwaters that had pushed saltwater deep into freshwater territories. The hurricane's storm surge had created an alien landscape where familiar hiking trails disappeared beneath murky channels and submerged trees created a labyrinth of hidden dangers. Caleb Drummond, a 38-year-old veteran park ranger with 15 years of Everglades experience, had been promoted to lead the post-storm assessment team just months before Idalia struck. Known for his calm demeanor and encyclopedic knowledge of local wildlife, Caleb possessed an intimate understanding of the park's normal ecosystem patterns. His partner, Sarah Chen, a 31-year-old junior ranger, had suggested waiting another day before entering the most severely flooded areas. Captain Rita Gonzalez had authorized the early assessment mission, despite ongoing flood warnings, trusting Caleb's reputation for cautious decision-making. The National Park Service needed immediate damage reports to coordinate rescue operations and assess threats to both wildlife and potential visitors. American crocodiles are the apex predators of South Florida's coastal waters, with adults reaching lengths of up to 15 feet and weighing over 1,000 pounds. Unlike alligators, these crocodiles prefer saltwater environments and typically maintain established territories along coastal mangroves and tidal creeks. Hurricane storm surges can violently displace these territorial predators, forcing them into unfamiliar freshwater areas where they become stressed and unpredictable. Their powerful bite force exceeds 2,500 pounds per square inch, while their muscular tails can deliver devastating blows capable of breaking human bones. When displaced from their normal territories, American crocodiles become highly aggressive as they seek to establish new hunting grounds, often attacking without the typical warning behaviors observed in their natural habitat. Caleb waded through the transformed landscape, his ranger uniform soaked to the chest as he documented storm damage using waterproof equipment. The floodwaters had created a featureless environment where GPS units became essential for navigation. Sarah followed 20 yards behind, both rangers moving carefully through water that concealed submerged obstacles and debris. Among the displaced wildlife was Athena, a 10-foot female American crocodile who had been forced from her coastal den and was now desperately seeking new territory in the flooded hammocks. She had not eaten in 4 days and was defending what she perceived as her temporary domain. Caleb approached what had been a hiking trail before the storm, now a channel of brown water flowing between submerged trees. He paused to photograph a damaged observation platform, positioning himself for the best camera angle. Athena lay motionless just 15 feet away, her body perfectly camouflaged among floating debris and fallen branches. The stressed crocodile had been monitoring the area for hours, her predatory instincts heightened by territorial displacement and hunger. As Caleb stepped forward to capture another image, his movement created ripples that reached the concealed predator. Athena exploded from her hidden position with lightning speed, her massive jaws closing around Caleb's torso before he could react. The impact drove him backward into deeper water as Sarah screamed from behind. The crocodile's powerful bite crushed several ribs and punctured his right lung, while her razor-sharp teeth penetrated deep into his chest cavity. The death roll began immediately, Athena spinning Caleb's body violently as she sought to disorient and drown her prey. The rotational force snapped his spine in 2 places, while the continued pressure from her jaws collapsed his sternum. Blood filled his punctured lung as broken ribs lacerated his heart and liver. His ranger radio crackled with Sarah's panicked calls for help, but the nearest rescue team was miles away through the flooded wilderness. The attack lasted 45 seconds, during which Athena's death roll broke Caleb's pelvis and caused massive internal bleeding. The veteran ranger drowned in the floodwaters he had come to assess, his body held firmly in the jaws of the displaced predator. The National Park Service launched an immediate investigation into the decision to enter flood zones before wildlife displacement patterns could be properly assessed. Captain Rita Gonzalez faced scrutiny for authorizing the mission despite ongoing safety warnings from meteorologists and wildlife biologists. The incident prompted new protocols requiring aerial surveys before ground teams could enter hurricane-affected areas. Caleb's family described him as a dedicated conservationist who had spent his career protecting the Everglades ecosystem. His death highlighted the unpredictable dangers faced by first responders in natural disaster zones where displaced wildlife creates hidden threats. The The tragedy led to enhanced safety training for park rangers working in post-hurricane environments. It was June 3, 2015, when the pristine waters of the Daintree River in Queensland, Australia, became the backdrop for a deadly social media stunt. The ancient waterway flows through one of the world's oldest rainforests, where 130-million-year-old vegetation creates a cathedral of green that stretches to the water's edge. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harbors some of Australia's most dangerous wildlife, including the highest concentration of saltwater crocodiles on the continent. Warning signs in multiple languages line the riverbanks, alerting visitors to the extreme danger posed by these apex predators. Hayley Monroe, a 26-year-old travel influencer with 2,000 followers, had built her brand on taking risks for dramatic content that surpassed her competitors' safer travel posts. Known for ignoring safety warnings in pursuit of the perfect shot, she had dismissed repeated warnings from local guides about the Daintree's crocodile population. Her boyfriend, Jake Morrison, a 24-year-old camera operator with limited wildlife experience, was more focused on capturing engaging footage than ensuring their safety. Bill Kowalski, an experienced local tour guide, had refused their request for access to restricted areas, forcing them to venture out independently. The couple had researched the most dangerous locations along the river, specifically seeking areas with prominent warning signs that would add authenticity to their extreme adventure content. Saltwater crocodiles are the world's largest living reptiles and most successful apex predators, with adult males reaching lengths of over 20 feet and weighing more than a ton. These ancient hunters possess the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth, capable of exerting pressure exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on perfect camouflage and explosive ambush attacks, remaining motionless for hours while monitoring their territory from submerged positions. The Daintree River system supports some of the largest saltwater crocodiles in Australia, with territorial males claiming stretches of river that they defend aggressively against any intrusion. Hayley positioned herself on the wet rocks at the water's edge, her bright pink outfit creating a stark contrast against the dark water as Jake adjusted camera angles from the bank. The area was marked with multiple warning signs that she deliberately included in her shots, speaking animatedly about the untamed beauty of the Australian wilderness. Bill Kowalski watched helplessly from his tour boat. The stretch of river was known territory for Goliath, a 17-foot saltwater crocodile that had claimed this section for over 2 decades. The massive predator lay submerged near the opposite bank, only his eyes and nostrils visible above the surface as he monitored the unusual activity. As Hayley gestured dramatically toward the river while delivering her scripted commentary, her designer sandals lost grip on the algae-covered rocks. She fell backward into the shallow water with a loud splash, landing just 10 feet from Goliath's concealed position. The sudden disturbance triggered an immediate predatory response from the territorial crocodile. Goliath exploded from the water with devastating speed, his massive jaws clamping down on Hayley's torso with bone-crushing force. The initial bite crushed her ribcage and punctured both lungs, while his razor-sharp teeth penetrated deep into her chest cavity. Jake continued filming in shock as the attack unfolded before his camera. The death roll began instantly, Goliath spinning Hayley's body violently as he dragged her into deeper water. The rotational force snapped her spine in multiple places, while the continued pressure from his jaws collapsed her sternum and shattered her shoulder blades. Blood streamed from massive lacerations as broken ribs punctured her heart and liver. The churning water turned crimson as Goliath maintained his grip, performing another death roll that broke her pelvis and femur bones. Hayley's struggles ceased within 30 seconds, as massive blood loss and drowning combined to end her life. The ancient predator held her motionless body in his powerful jaws, asserting dominance over his territory. Queensland authorities launched an investigation into how the influencers had accessed the restricted area, reviewing security measures at dangerous wildlife locations. The incident sparked debate about social media platforms' responsibility for content that encourages dangerous behavior in pursuit of viral fame. Tourism officials expressed concern about copycat incidents, as Haley's final video gained millions of views posthumously. Haley's family criticized social media culture for pressuring content creators to take increasingly dangerous risks for engagement. The tragedy prompted calls for stricter enforcement of wildlife protection zones and enhanced penalties for unauthorized access to dangerous areas. Haley Monroe's story showed how social media fame can lead to deadly encounters with apex predators. It was June 14, 2017, in Phatthalung, a quiet province in southern Thailand, where the river runs slow and brown through the mangrove edges. The day was hot, the air thick and still, and the water carried a faint, sour smell after a week of rain. A few tourists stood on the bank, their cameras raised toward a man waist-deep in the shallows. What began as a small crowd's amusement would end as the village's most grim story, one that no one wanted to retell, but none could forget. Prasert Wanachai, 38, worked as a boat repairman near the pier. He had lived by the river his entire life, fixing outboard motors and patching old hulls for fishermen and guides. He was known locally for his humor, always talking loud, teasing visitors, making them laugh. It earned him small tips and a kind of notoriety. The foreigners called him as the River Joker. He liked the attention. He had grown up watching crocodiles from the wooden docks as a boy, and often claimed they knew his scent, that they wouldn't touch him. To the locals it sounded foolish, but harmless, until he began showing off to tourists more boldly that year. Tourism had picked up again after the floods. Prasert saw that as opportunity. On afternoons when tours docked nearby, he'd wade into the shallows, slap the water, and shout at the river to make visitors laugh. He did it for show, for pocket money, for the small thrill of being the man everyone pointed a camera at. He never carried a stick, never watched the currents. The more people warned him, the more fearless he pretended to be. That afternoon, the river looked swollen and slow. Mud and driftwood floated near the banks, and the air smelled of decay from leaves and stagnant water. The sun had broken through gray clouds, turning the surface gold in places and black in others. The river widened toward the mangrove line, where tall reeds hid what moved beneath. The Siamese crocodile is smaller than the saltwater species, but equally lethal. Males can reach 12 feet and weigh nearly 1,000 pounds. They are ambush hunters, relying on patience, motionless until a splash or vibration signals prey. Their bite force exceeds 3,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone in a single snap. Locals had seen them resurface after floods, drifting near villages where fish were abundant. They usually avoided people, unless provoked. Prasert had been told about recent sightings near the pier. 2 fishermen claimed to have seen a large croc moving upriver the previous night, its eyes reflecting orange in their flashlight beam. Others urged him not to go near the water, especially while it was still muddy. But the warnings made his audience larger. That day, a group of German tourists had gathered, laughing and filming as he stood knee-deep, slapping the surface with his hand. His friends, drinking nearby, called out for him to call the croc. He grinned, waved at the cameras, and kept hitting the water harder. The river rippled several yards away. A small V-shaped wake appeared, gliding toward him with slow precision. The tourists murmured, unsure if it was real. Prasert turned toward it, squinting against the glare, then laughed and splashed again. The ripple stopped, then vanished. For a moment, everything went silent except for the hum of insects. Then the water exploded. A dark, massive shape erupted from the surface, jaws wide, striking his torso. The impact was like a crack of wood splitting. Witnesses said his scream cut through the still air, short, sharp, then choked. The crocodile twisted violently, dragging him sideways into the deeper water. He tried to grab the muddy bank, leaving streaks in the clay, but the croc's body rolled, pulling him under in seconds. The tourists stumbled backward, some dropping their phones, others shouting in disbelief. His friends ran to the edge, throwing sticks, shouting his name, but the water boiled with mud and foam before going completely still. Only a faint red swirl spread downstream. The river went quiet after the attack. The tourists stood frozen, still recording, unsure if it was over. Then, to everyone's shock, the water stirred once more. 2 men from the pier waded in with poles, striking until they saw movement. The crocodile slipped away downstream, leaving Prasert floating face down near the reeds. They pulled him to shore, his legs torn deeply and one arm nearly severed. Someone called the rangers, while others tried to wrap his wounds with shirts. He was still breathing when they carried him to the pickup that served as an ambulance. By the time they reached the district hospital, 40 minutes later, he had lost too much blood. Doctors said the lacerations to his thigh and abdomen were catastrophic. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The riverbank where he had performed his shows was closed for weeks. Locals placed a bamboo cross near the spot, tied with colored cloth. Tour boats still pass that bend, but guides lower their voices when they do. They say the water there feels heavier now, silent, as if waiting. It was October 29th, 2017, in Gale, a coastal city in southern Sri Lanka, where the rain had not stopped for 7 days. The streets had become shallow rivers, flowing around parked cars and storefronts. People walked barefoot through ankle-deep water, carrying bags above their heads and laughing at the strangeness of it. The flood had turned the familiar into something uncertain. Beneath the surface, the drainage canals that connected to the main lagoon were swollen and dark, and something alive had followed the current inland. Harsha Samarasinghe, 29, worked as a motorbike courier for a small logistics company. He was known around the neighborhood as quick, helpful, and always joking. When the rains came, his work slowed down. He spent his days near the local grocery, helping people push stalled bikes through the water for tips and entertainment. He liked attention, posting short clips online of odd things he saw during deliveries. It wasn't about fame, just the fun of it. He lived with his younger brother in a 2-room house near the canal, and often told him that the floods made life interesting. That afternoon, as the water level rose again, word spread that a crocodile had drifted into the residential area. A few neighbors saw it first, a large shape resting in front of a small grocery, half covered in mud. By the time Harsha arrived, 10 or 12 people had gathered around it. Some stood on the steps with their phones out, others shouted for it to move. The animal lay still, its body blending with the brown water. To most, it looked harmless, tired, maybe stranded. Harsha grinned, waded closer, and lifted his phone to start a live stream. The flooded street shimmered in the weak afternoon light. Plastic wrappers floated by. Somewhere, a dog barked. The air smelled of diesel and rot. The water was waist-deep in the center, hiding gutters and small drainage ditches. The crocodile's tail curved slightly, as if caught in a current. But its eyes didn't move. Rain began to fall again. Light, steady drops breaking the surface. Saltwater crocodiles are common in Sri Lanka's southern wetlands. Males can grow beyond 15 feet, weighing over 1,000 pounds. During heavy floods, they often travel inland through canals, hunting stray dogs or livestock. They can hold still for hours, their camouflage nearly perfect in muddy water. Despite their bulk, They can launch forward faster than a person can react, up to 20 miles per hour in short bursts. Most locals know to avoid them, but every flood brings new encounters, and curiosity often wins. The local police had issued a radio warning that morning, advising residents to stay away from flooded canals and ditches. Some people said they heard one had been seen earlier near the fish market. Harsha likely heard these same reports, but to him, this was something rare, something to film. He said it looked dead. Others said it was just resting. No one wanted to get close enough to find out. When he picked up a broken broom handle floating nearby, laughter rose from the crowd. He used it to poke at the animal's tail while still holding his phone in his other hand. The crocodile didn't move at first. The stick hit its side. Then again, people called for him to stop, but he took a step closer to get a better shot. The moment his foot sank into the deeper part of the street, the surface broke. The crocodile's head shot forward in a single violent surge, jaws clamping onto his lower leg. The sound was dull, heavy, like wood cracking underwater. Harsha fell sideways, screaming as the phone slipped from his hand into the water. Panic broke out. Several men shouted and ran, splashing through the flood. The crocodile pulled backward toward the deeper ditch beside the grocery, its entire body twisting with the force of a roll. Harsha grabbed a metal gate post, trying to anchor himself, but the croc rolled again, spinning him under. The water erupted with mud and foam, then turned red. One man threw a rock, another hit the water with a pole, but it made no difference. Within seconds, the thrashing stopped. Only the rain and the murmur of running water filled the silence. A few people stayed frozen on the steps, waiting for movement. The gate Harsha had grabbed rattled slightly from the current. His phone floated up a few minutes later, screen cracked but still recording, showing only the surface of the muddy water and the sound of distant shouting. By the time rescuers arrived an hour later, the water had risen higher, carrying debris from the ditch downstream. At dawn, officials drained the section of flooded street, revealing tangled debris, branches, plastic bags, and one black sneaker wedged beneath a metal grate. They found no body. The municipality placed plastic barricades and a warning sign where it happened, but when the next monsoon came, the barriers drifted away with the rain. Locals still mention it when the streets flood again. How easy it is to mistake stillness for safety when the river finds its way back home. It was August 21st, 2015, along the lower banks of the Tana River in eastern Kenya, where the water ran low and thick after a dry spell. The air was heavy with heat, and the mud at the edges had begun to crack. It was quiet except for the drone of insects and the occasional ripple where fish broke the surface. The stillness of that evening hid the violence waiting beneath. Joseph Mwangi, 44, had lived his whole life in a settlement on the river's edge. He farmed maize and kept a few animals, enough to feed his family through most seasons. He was known as practical and steady, not reckless. But the loss of 2 goats and a calf to a crocodile over the past month had unsettled him. It wasn't just the loss, it was the helplessness of watching his work vanish overnight. For a man who had lived beside the river his whole life, it felt like an insult. He spoke often about the animal that took his stock, describing it as large, marked with a scar near its tail. No one else had seen it clearly. Villagers warned him to leave it alone and let the rangers handle it, but no one came. The attacks continued. He became convinced he knew the crocodile's pattern, surfacing near dusk when livestock came to drink. He stopped sleeping well, waiting each night for the sounds of splashing. When a neighbor once joked that he should finish it, Joseph took the remark as a challenge. He built a crude spear from a steel rod and wrapped its end with wire for grip. On that Friday evening, he told his wife he was checking his traps. Instead, he went to the riverbank. The Tana that night looked deceptively calm. The last light of the sun turned it copper brown, and small whirlpools formed where the current met the reeds. Birds perched in the acacia trees, motionless, watching. The air carried the smell of algae and old mud. Every step Joseph took left a print in the wet ground that filled instantly with water. From where he crouched, the opposite bank was barely visible, a dark shape in the fading light. Crocodiles are territorial and can remain in the same stretch of river for decades. Males in this region can reach up to 16 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their eyes and nostrils sit high on their heads, allowing them to stay submerged with only the surface visible. At dusk, their vision sharpens while human sight weakens. They hunt by ambush, drawn by vibrations rather than sight. Local rangers often say that by the time you see one, it's already too close. Joseph ignored those warnings. He believed the water near his property was shallow, and that the crocodile would have to surface to strike. He walked barefoot for silence, carrying the spear in both hands. He waited for movement, for any ripple. The frogs had stopped croaking, something he noticed but didn't interpret as danger. He saw the surface stir just beyond a cluster of reeds, and his breathing slowed. He raised the spear, both hands gripping it tightly. What happened next was later pieced together from the marks found along the bank and the account of the man who had followed him at a distance. He threw it with all his strength. The splash was sharp and loud. A second later, the water erupted. The crocodile surged upward, jaws wide, its weight displacing the mud like a collapsing wall. In a single motion, the animal lunged again, hitting him mid-torso and forcing him backward into the shallows. He fell hard, his heel sliding through the mud. He tried to reach the spear, but the croc's jaws clamped around his left arm. The sound was heavy and quick, a crack followed by the rush of water. From a distance, his neighbor, who had followed out of curiosity, heard the splash and ran toward the noise. He saw the tail thrash once, then twist. Joseph was dragged sideways into deeper water. His scream carried across the river, but broke off as the crocodile rolled, turning the surface white with foam and mud. The man shouted for help, but by the time others arrived with flashlights, the water had gone still again. They searched with sticks and lanterns, wading cautiously, but found nothing. The only sign was a thin trail of bubbles that faded within minutes. The current drifted calmly again, as if nothing had happened. By morning, the river had swallowed its evidence. The neighbor found Joseph's broken spear embedded in the mud and streaks of blood along the bank. Rangers arrived later that day, following drag marks into the water. Hours downstream, they found a large crocodile resting near the bend. In its mouth were strands of torn fabric, part of Joseph's shirt. The animal was captured but not killed. It was relocated to a protected section of the river where attacks were less common. When word spread, some villagers called it a tragedy. Others said it was pride. His wife refused to go to the river or watch the retrieval. She said he had made his choice the night he carried the spear. By the next week, the marks of the struggle had vanished under new mud and footprints. The river, swollen again after fresh rain, returned to its slow, silent course, as it always did after taking something. It was February 18th, 2015, in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, where the Fitzroy River had broken its banks after a week of heavy rain. The morning sun glinted across flooded grasslands that stretched farther than usual, covering fence lines and turning open paddocks into shallow wetlands. The air was thick and humid, heavy with the smell of mud and rotting vegetation. The water looked harmless, calm, still almost flat. But beneath it, the river's edge had vanished. Michael Turner, 39, worked as a farmhand on a property bordering the river. He was the kind of man people called when animals went missing, or when floodwaters stranded livestock. Neighbors said he had a steady way about him. Patient, soft-spoken, and confident around animals. He'd grown up in the region and understood its weather and rhythms. The rains didn't worry him. When the low-lying pastures filled, he helped others move cattle to higher ground, driving his old utility truck through the mud with practiced ease. That week, a small blue heeler, one of the station dogs, wandered off during a storm. By mid-morning, the animal was visible again, marooned on a grassy rise a few hundred feet across the floodplain. It barked and circled, stranded by the water that had crept in overnight. Michael spotted it while checking the fence line and decided to bring it back before the water rose again. His partner and a neighbor stood by the truck, watching as he grabbed a stick and started toward the dog. He told them it looked shallow, no more than knee-high, and that he'd be back in a few minutes. The plain was silent except for the soft push of water against the grass. Mosquitoes drifted in swarms, and the air carried a faint metallic scent from the wet soil. The sun was pale behind low clouds, and the horizon seemed to merge with the flooded field. Michael waded forward, each step sending slow ripples outward. His reflection broke and reformed in the brown surface. Saltwater crocodiles are known to travel far inland during the wet season. When rivers overflow, they follow the floodwater into new areas, hunting stray livestock and dogs. Males can grow beyond 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. They move with deceptive stillness, waiting under cover until vibrations signal something alive nearby. Locals know to be cautious during floods, but familiarity often dulls that sense of risk. The plain that day looked empty, but the same channels that carried fish and debris from the river could also hide predators. Michael's partner later said she felt uneasy as he walked farther out. The dog barked, tail low, shifting on its small patch of dry ground. The neighbor noticed faint ripples moving against the wind, small arcs spreading near the center of the plain. Neither spoke up, thinking it might be fish or drifting grass. Michael was about 30 yards in when the water reached his thighs. He lifted the stick, calling softly, trying to coax the dog toward him. The surface behind him suddenly rippled in a wide V shape that closed fast. Before he could turn fully, the water erupted. A massive shape surged upward, jaws snapping around his leg with a violent splash. The impact threw him sideways, the sound heavy and final. Mud and foam sprayed into the air, then the water rolled back over itself. The dog bolted at once, sprinting toward the far side. Michael's partner screamed and ran toward the bank, but the surface ahead exploded again, this time with a twisting tail breaking through before vanishing. The motion lasted only seconds. 2 bursts, then stillness. His hat floated up and drifted toward the edge. The only sound afterward was wind moving through the reeds. They stood at the water's edge, shouting his name, scanning for movement. The floodplain gave nothing back. The surface stayed calm, dull with stirred mud, the air thick with heat. By nightfall, police and wildlife officers had arrived. They used small boats and searchlights, following drag marks that led toward a deeper drainage channel connecting to the river. The next morning, a search team found torn fabric and 1 boot tangled in reeds half a mile downstream. Tracks pressed into the mud confirmed a large crocodile, likely a male pushed inland by the flood. Days later, officers captured a 14-foot specimen near a narrowing in the channel, but they couldn't prove it was the same one. Michael's body was never found. When the rains ended weeks later, the floodplain dried and cracked in the sun. Grass regrew where the water had stood. Locals said it was the year the river walked too far inland, claiming land that wasn't meant to be its own. The dog returned on its own a few days after the search ended, covered in mud and silent, lying beside the truck where Michael had left it. It was September 2nd, 2017, in a small village outside Palembang, Indonesia. The dry season had lingered longer than usual. The soil was cracked, and dust clung to everything. The trees, the tin roofs, even the slow-moving air. By noon, the heat shimmered above the narrow roads. Behind one of the older houses stood a shallow, concrete basin, once used for breeding fish. It hadn't held anything but rainwater for years. But in the drought, it became the only patch of damp shade left in the yard. Siti Marlena, 69, had lived there all her life. She'd raised 3 children in that house, all of whom had moved to the city long ago. Her husband had died nearly a decade earlier, and since then, she kept herself busy tending her garden and feeding stray animals. She was known in the neighborhood as generous but stubborn, a woman who preferred routine over caution. During that dry stretch, when even the birds had stopped visiting, she decided to refill the old fish basin from her well to give animals a place to drink. Neighbors often warned her that crocodiles sometimes moved through the drainage canals south of the village. They had heard of sightings near the sugar fields and once saw one stranded by a blocked culvert, its tail caked in mud. Siti brushed those stories off. The nearest canal was more than 100 yards away, and her yard was fenced. She said if a crocodile ever reached her home, it would mean the river itself had decided to visit. That morning, she filled several buckets from the well, carrying them one by one to the basin behind her house. The water inside was cloudy, covered in a thin green film. She used an old ladle to stir it, shooing away mosquitoes. The air smelled of dry earth and stagnant water. Crickets chirped from the grass, and somewhere a rooster called weakly. It was the first time in weeks she'd seen the basin nearly full. Saltwater crocodiles are common in southern Sumatra, able to travel through narrow canals and survive in brackish or even fresh water. During droughts, they often move in search of cooler, deeper pools, settling in abandoned ponds or shaded runoff basins. Large adults, reaching up to 15 feet in length, can stay submerged for nearly an hour, moving silently through water that seems too small to hide them. Locals rarely expect them in dry conditions, which makes these encounters more dangerous. In the days before the incident, some of Siti's neighbors noticed that stray dogs had stopped drinking from the basin. One man claimed he saw faint ripples there after sunset, though the air was still. When he mentioned it to her, she laughed, saying he was seeing the wind play tricks on the surface. That morning, as she walked behind her house again with another bucket, the ground around the basin looked undisturbed. Nothing seemed out of place. She set the bucket down beside her and leaned over to pour water into the basin. The sound of splashing echoed sharply in the still yard. The moment the stream hit the surface, something below shifted, a swirl of mud rising to the top. Before she could react, the water broke open. A dark shape surged upward, jaws clamping around her left arm with a dull crack. The force knocked her sideways, spilling the bucket and pulling her knee against the concrete edge. She screamed once, the sound short and hoarse. The crocodile twisted immediately, dragging her towards the center of the basin. Neighbors heard the crash of metal and rushed outside, thinking a wall had collapsed. What they saw was the surface churning violently, muddy water spilling over the rim. Her legs kicked once above the surface before disappearing. The entire struggle lasted less than 10 seconds. When the water stilled, the basin looked as calm as before, except for the spilled bucket and a faint red tint near the center. One neighbor, a retired mechanic, ran to the edge with a wooden pole and tried to stir the water, but it was too deep to see the bottom. Others shouted for help and brought ropes, but no one dared step close. The basin was only about 8 feet across, but deep enough to hide a full-grown animal. By the time the police and local wildlife officers arrived, it was late afternoon. The water was drained using a portable pump, revealing the cracked concrete floor covered in silt. In the corner beneath a layer of mud, They found the crocodile, nearly 12 feet long, still gripping part of City's clothing in its teeth. Her body was removed the next morning. Officials believed the animal had entered her yard through a narrow drainage ditch behind the property, likely following the smell of water during the drought. It had remained trapped in the basin after feeding. The crocodile was euthanized on site. Her small house was later sealed, its back gate chained to prevent access. Weeks later, when the rains finally came, the basin filled again. No one touched it. The neighbors said that birds landed on the fence but never on the water. They avoided that side of the yard altogether. And when asked why, one man said the water there never felt empty anymore. It was June 14, 2019, along the muddy banks of the Tarcoles River in Punta Arenas province, Costa Rica. The river, notorious for its dense population of American crocodiles, winds through mangrove forests before emptying into the Pacific. Locals and tourists alike flock to the bridge above to watch the massive reptiles bask on sandbars below. Illegal feeding over the years had conditioned many of the crocodiles to associate humans with food, making them bolder and more willing to approach the shoreline. The low water season had exposed more of the muddy banks, creating deceptive footing that appeared solid but was slick with algae and decomposing vegetation. Warning signs posted along the bridge and riverbank had faded from sun exposure, their messages barely legible. Sofia Rojas, a 25-year-old marketing assistant from San Jose, had driven down with her friend Carla Jimenez for a weekend getaway. Both women were drawn to the thrill of close wildlife encounters, often posting videos to social media. That afternoon, they hired Diego Vargas, a 47-year-old boatman known for his cautious nature and strict adherence to safety protocols. Diego had been ferrying tourists along the river for over a decade and had seen firsthand how dangerous the crocodiles could become when provoked. He warned the women repeatedly not to approach the water's edge or attempt to feed the animals. A park warden patrolling the bridge above also shouted down warnings, his stern voice carrying over the humid air. The repeated cautions hinted at the very real danger lurking just beneath the surface. Two other tourists sat quietly in the skiff, visibly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Diego had even mentioned a recent incident where a crocodile had lunged at a fisherman who got too close. Sofia, however, was determined to capture something dramatic. She carried a plastic bag filled with fish scraps, intending to lure a crocodile close enough for a striking video. Carla encouraged her, phone in hand, ready to record. Diego idled the skiff a few meters offshore, shaking his head but saying nothing more. The midday heat pressed down as several crocodiles floated lazily near the surface, their eyes and nostrils barely visible above the waterline. American crocodiles are among the largest reptilian predators in the Western Hemisphere, capable of reaching lengths over 13 feet and weighing upwards of 880 pounds. Unlike their more aggressive cousins, they are generally wary of humans, but food conditioning erases that natural caution. They are ambush hunters, relying on explosive bursts of speed from a stationary position. Their jaws exert crushing force, and once they secure a grip, they employ a signature maneuver, the death roll, a violent rotational spin designed to disorient prey and tear flesh. In the Tarcoles River, these animals have become accustomed to boats and human presence, making them unpredictable and dangerous. Sofia stepped onto the slick bank, her sandals sinking slightly into the algae-coated mud. She waved a fish scrap toward the water, laughing as a large crocodile began to angle toward her. The animal moved with eerie silence, only its eyes and the ridge of its snout breaking the surface. Sofia turned her back to the river for a moment, grinning at Carla and the camera. Her heel slipped on the wet surface. She windmilled her arms, struggling to regain balance. The crocodile exploded upward from the shallow shelf. Its jaws snapped shut around her lower left leg just above the ankle. The bite was immediate and total, teeth punching through skin, muscle, and compressing bone. Sofia was yanked off her feet and dragged backward into knee-deep water. She tried to brace her free leg against the riverbed, but the crocodile was already in motion. It twisted its entire body in a rapid, forceful roll. Her knee dislocated with an audible pop as ligaments tore. The rotational force pulled her completely under the surface, and a cloud of silt erupted around them. The crocodile released briefly, repositioning for a better hold. It clamped down again, this time higher on her thigh. The teeth sank deep, severing the femoral artery. Blood darkened the water in thick plumes. The animal dragged her toward a deeper channel, its powerful tail sweeping side to side. Sophia's head went under again. She could not surface. The crocodile maintained its grip, holding her submerged as she struggled. Her movements weakened. Water filled her lungs. The combination of catastrophic blood loss and drowning ended her life within minutes. The crocodile eventually released her body in the deeper current, where it drifted before snagging on submerged roots. Nearby crocodiles, drawn by the splashing and scent of blood, began to gather in the shallows, a common behavioral response in areas where multiple animals compete for food. Diego radioed for help immediately, but by the time authorities arrived, there was nothing to be done. Sophia's body was recovered later that afternoon. The park warden filed a report citing repeated safety violations and the dangers of feeding wildlife. Her family released a brief statement expressing their grief and urging others to respect wildlife boundaries. Local officials announced plans to increase patrols and remove habituated crocodiles from high-traffic areas. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.